To discuss is Behnam Ben Taleblu. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Thanks so much for joining.
Pleasure.
So it appears the U.S. and Israel have come to agreement not to strike nuclear facilities, which the U.S. was concerned would escalate this to something more broad. Oil facilities, which sounds like the U.S. is concerned would lead to a spike in oil prices, but that something will happen before Election Day. I wonder, is Election Day at all relevant, in your view, to the Israeli Prime Minister's calculus here? Is he going to strike when he deems Israel ready?
Well, I certainly think there is a political rationale or a political element to the delay thus far between the Iranian strike and the much anticipated Israeli retaliation. But I would be remiss to say that there aren't other factors here. There's legal factors, of course, most importantly strategic factors. Is this going to be a one-off? Like, is this just an operation versus a larger campaign? And also military. What kind of sites? Is it direct retaliation to the places that launched against Israel on October 1st? Is it to go after a capability to handicap the long-range strike capabilities? There's all these military and political questions that every time you turn the issue is kind of like a kaleidoscope, turns and looks fundamentally differently.
Now, in terms of military targets, of course, one could go after the ballistic missiles that targeted Israel now twice this year, and I was there for one of them recently. But there's also the possibility that one might lay the groundwork for further strikes. For instance, if Israel were to go after surface-to-air missiles around nuclear installations, right, make a subsequent attack, if that were decided upon, easier for Israeli forces.
Exactly, and that could be also one of these reasons for the delay, is this a disarming or a defanging type of operation to pave the way to even be able to credibly threaten the use of force without ever actually having to use force down the line. This could also bolster, by the way, U.S. attempts to engage in coercive diplomacy with the Iranians to say, hey, look, your nuclear facilities are unguarded, you better make a nuclear deal with us in good faith. And this is something that could actually help either Democratic or Republican administrations down the line.
You often hear this, reestablishing deterrence language, or this even escalate to de-escalate languages, as each side has been trading quite dangerous blows, right, in the past several months here. In your view, does either side in this want to de-escalate?
I don't see a clear definition of political or military victory articulated by the leadership on either side just yet, but I do see a willingness by the leadership on both sides, on both Israel and Iran, to be able to try to exploit the middle. And that's why this theory of escalate to de-escalate has really been put forward by both sides. They want a new Middle East, but they want a new Middle East on their terms. And it just so happens to be that the primary tool to make this new Middle East on both sides is apparently going to be military force.
I want to ask about Lebanon now, because what we're seeing take place there in terms of the scale of the airstrikes, but also now a rising civilian toll, while not the equivalent of what we've seen in terms of scale or concentration to Gaza, it has some similarities. And you have this strike, for instance, in Lebanon, taking place while a meeting, according to Lebanese officials, was taking place in that building. And I know that Israel is saying there was Hezbollah infrastructure below. But if you're striking while there are civilians there, including the mayor, is Israel getting the I always hate the phrase collateral damage, because we're talking about human beings here, but is Israel again showing insufficient attention to civilian casualties in southern Lebanon?
It depends or not if there was a knock or at least a warning. This is traditionally the kind of thing that predates any kind of Israeli overt aerial strike. It remains to be seen if this was the case when it comes to this building or some of the suburbs in South Beirut. But I think largely the goal is to find a way to handicap Hezbollah at any cost, and that means
any cost, even human civilian costs.
Well, I think unfortunately human civilian costs are part of the equation. I think Israel has done far and away better than most countries if you had been confronted with a multi-front, multi-domain threat, land, sea, air, 5 or 6 different borders, conventional, asymmetric, and one that has state sponsorship, but for some reason that state sponsor has gotten away scot-free, literally killing Israeli civilians since October 7.
I get that. Listen, I know the threat, and I've certainly experienced the threat on the ground there myself, and I've talked to victims of the threat going back to October 7th and beyond. But the question is, of course, more is expected of Israel, because Israel is a liberal democracy there, and it has the U.S. as its ally.
And I would say, indeed, more has been seen of Israel than any other actor who would be in that space.
Well, there is, you'll admit, disagreement. There's even been criticism from U.S. officials right up to the President Biden, that Israel has shown insufficient concern to civilians in Gaza.
Currently over North Gaza.
Yeah, in Gaza for sure. So my question is what we're seeing in Lebanon right now by Israeli forces, does that show that pressure doesn't work, or that the decision has been made, that Israeli officials have made the decision that, listen, we're comfortable with this level of civilian casualties?
I don't know if the Israeli leadership is comfortable with that level of civilian casualties. Both the military and political establishment, to the best of my view, are doing everything they can to minimize it and should be doing more as the war unfolds. But I think the war will be unfolding. That's where I do see the consensus between the military and the political establishment, meaning that which we see in Lebanon is really just one phase of, I think, of a much larger campaign. I do see a real philosophical change in the way Israel sees the threat environment around it since October 7, and they have gone from problem managing to problem solving.
Behnam Ben Taleblu, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you.